Hey everyone, and welcome back to the PTG Rail Routes Learning series. In this episode, we're going to be taking another look at Train Sim World, and I'm going to be driving a full run of the recently released Ruhr Sieg Nord route between Finnentrop and Hagen. So the service that I'm driving is train RB91 Siegen to Hagen, departing away from Finnentrop at 9:30 am with a total journey distance of just over 61 kilometers. Our stops along the way, if I can pronounce these correctly, are Plettenberg, Werdohl, Altena, Letmathe, Hohenlimburg, and finally Hagen. Of course, the full route hasn't been simulated in Train Sim World, it's only part of the route between Finnentrop and Hagen. But if you do actually want to drive the full route between Siegen and Hagen, then you can do so within Train Simulator. The original route in Train Simulator is actually quite old now, but there is an updated version available which significantly improves the route over its original form. The locomotive that's hauling our service today is a BR143, though it's also known as the BR243, which is arguably the most successful class of locomotives ever produced in Germany. A total of 636 of these locomotives were produced, with a maximum speed of 120 km per hour, which is around 75 miles per hour, and a power output of 4,990 horsepower, or 3,720 kilowatts, giving a maximum tractive effort of 240 kilonewtons, or 54,000 pounds of force. These locomotives were first run in 1985, so they're fairly old now. In fact, they're older than me, and I'm certainly not feeling young these days. The electrical system that they run off is the 15 kilovolt 16.7 hertz overhead electrification system found throughout Germany. Each locomotive is 16.64 meters long, which is 54 feet 7 inches, and the locomotives weigh 82.5 metric tons. Now in the cab of the locomotive, there's just a few things I'm going to do here to set up ready for departure. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get the headlights into the correct configuration. So I'm going to press H, which turns on one of the headlights, but unfortunately the two side headlights don't turn on with the H key, and so I've actually got to go over to the headlight keys here. And if I just turn that and that, so the two switches there to the left and right of the middle switch, if you turn them up, then that puts the headlights all on in the white position, so the headlights are now all set up correctly. Now what I need to do is to move the reversing handle into the forward position with the W key, and now that that's done, the next thing that I'm going to do is turn on the safety systems. So if I press Control and Enter, that turns on PZB, and if I press Shift and Enter, then that turns on the CIFA system, which is the German version of the driver safety device. As for PZB, which is the German signalling system which is going to be used on this journey today, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how it works, as I've just recently released a remade German signalling guide which goes into quite a lot of detail about how to interact with the PZB system. So I'm going to put the link to that signalling guide in the description of this video if you'd like to learn more about German signals. So the BR143 locomotive actually operates very much like the BR112 that I recently covered in a video between Hamburg and Lübeck. So I'm going to just quickly go through how this works here. You can just see to our left we've got the throttle control. If I just move that, you can see there, that's the throttle control, which actually acts as a form of AFB or cruise control system. So just to the right of the throttle control, we've got the tractive effort and brake force lever. The higher that lever is, so if I just move it, you can see which lever I'm talking about there. The higher that lever is, then the faster the train will be able to accelerate to the speed. So if we look at the speedometer there, you can just see a small yellow bug on the outside of the speedometer. As I increase the throttle, that yellow bug will go up. And say I increase the throttle so that the yellow bug is pointing at 100 on the speedometer, then the train will accelerate up to 100 kilometers per hour at the amount of power that I've allowed it to use by using the tractive effort and brake force lever. So if I move the tractive effort and brake force lever down, say to the middle position, then the train won't accelerate as quickly to that speed. But once we've reached 100 kilometers per hour, then the train will reduce the power automatically, and as a result of that, we then shouldn't exceed 100 kilometers per hour unless we're going downhill. This doesn't quite work in the same way as AFB. It's not quite as accurate, and so it is possible if you're going downhill to slip a couple of kilometers per hour over the speed limit. So the speedometer there is of course measured in kilometers per hour. As already mentioned, our maximum speed is 120 kilometers per hour, which we will be able to get up to towards the end of this journey today. If we now continue around the cab here and we go to the right hand side, you can see here that we've got different brake controls. So the locomotive brake is the brake control at the top, controlling the brakes purely on the BR143 locomotive. And then just below that we've got the train brake, which controls the brakes on the whole train. And as I increase the braking, you can see that the yellow needle there in the brake gauge towards the left of the screen was actually dropping, which indicates how hard the brakes are applied. If I now release the brakes there, you can see that that needle's gone up to 4.5, and if I now reapply the brakes, that needle will fall again. So with the brake gauge on this particular locomotive, it's the lower the needle is pointing there, then the harder the brakes are applied. Departing away from Finnentrop, the starting speed limit here is 110 kilometers per hour, though it is very quickly going to be going down to 100 kilometers per hour, so I'm not accelerating above 100 kilometers per hour at this point. And we've got 12.7 kilometers to go to our first stop, which is Plettenberg. You may have noticed that I just released from restricted monitoring as we pulled away from Finnentrop station, which would have limited us to 45 kilometers per hour. But as the signal ahead was clear, I was able to release from restricted monitoring here. So we've now reached 100 kilometers per hour and the train is holding us at that speed. One thing I didn't mention earlier is the use of the instrument lights on this particular locomotive. So if I press I to turn on the instrument lights, you can actually barely see the bug on the outside of the speedometer. And as a result of that, I tend to drive with the instrument lights switched off and then just turn them on when I'm going through a tunnel to enable me to see what the instruments are doing. I decided to release this video directly after the German signalling guide, just because I felt that it went well together to have a German journey after making that video. I just wanted to say that the next video I make will be back in the UK, and I'm planning a journey between Blenheim-Fürstenau and Llandudno on the backdated train sim routes in a Class 150. And then following on from that, I'm hoping to cover an American journey, possibly the Morristown line, part of the New Jersey transit area. I just drove through a journey of that route the other day and I quite enjoyed it, so I thought it would make quite a good video to do. I've also started writing the script for my next scripted video, which is going to be the first route guide I've made in 2 years, and it's going to be on the Great Eastern Main Line, covering the full history of the routes between London Liverpool Street and Norwich. What I'm looking out for now is a warning of an upcoming 70 km/h speed restriction. At that warning, there is an active 1000 Hz PZB magnet, so I'm going to have to acknowledge the PZB system, and then I've got to be below 85 km/h within the next 23 seconds to ensure that an emergency brake application doesn't happen. So just coming up on the speed warning here, and now acknowledging the PZB with the page down key, and now let's just reduce our speed set here to ensure that we're down below 85 km/h in time. The speed warning's actually 1.2 kilometers from the speed limit itself, so it do seem to be braking quite early for that speed limit. So just put the speed set to 80 for a moment, as we don't really need to be down to 70 quite that quickly. I'm just preparing now to reduce the speed set further to 70 to ensure that we are down to that speed in time. And we're now entering the 70 km/h speed zone. The speed limit here is now going back up to 100 km/h, and I can accelerate at this second overhead gantry just here. At this point we've now got around 4.5 kilometers to go. We've now got a warning for an upcoming 80 km/h speed restriction, which is actually 1 kilometre away from the limit. And of course we've now got 23 seconds to get down below 85 km/h. And as the speed set only jumps in multiples of 10, we've just set the speed set down to 80. So we do have to slow down a little bit earlier than you would think you would need to for this upcoming speed restriction. We're actually now going downhill slightly at 1 in 200, so I'm just going to slow us down a little bit below 80 to try and ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit here. I'll turn on the instrument lights just for a moment as we went through the tunnel so I could see what the speedometer was doing there. For some reason the game seems to have got an awful lot quieter a moment ago. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but I've noticed this happening when driving this route. The volume doesn't seem quite consistent. So we've just passed kilometre post 50 with 1.7 kilometres to go to our stop. At this point I'm now going to idle the power just to allow the train to coast here. I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment at around kilometre post 48.8, so we've just passed 49. As we reach the next kilometre post, I'm going to start braking for our stop. So now coming into Plettenberg station, and I'm aiming to stop next to the H sign, which should be coming up shortly. So that's the first H sign there. That's not the one that I want to stop next to. In fact, I've just noticed there's 3 H signs here. I believe it's the third one that I'm aiming to stop by. So we should now be stopped in just about the right place. Departing away from Plettenberg, the starting speed limit here is immediately going up to 110 kilometers per hour, with around 9 kilometers to go to our next stop, which is Werdohl. As we reach the end of this tunnel here, we've now got around 3.5 kilometers to go. Now passing a flashing green signal with a restrictive speed of 100 kilometers per hour, which applies to the next main signal, which is around 1 kilometer away. I'm just going to slow down to that now. One thing I have noticed in Train Sim World is that these signal speed restrictions aren't necessarily enforced on the HUD. So when you pass the next signal, it won't actually show you that the speed limit has changed. As we enter this next tunnel just coming up, we've got 1 kilometer to go to our stop. I'm going to start braking as we reach the other end of the tunnel here, and there's also a PZB warning at a 70 kilometer per hour speed warning coming up, so you've got to make sure that you acknowledge that as you come out of this tunnel. So I've just idled the power now to allow the train to coast. I've now got the brakes on for our stop, and I've just acknowledged the 70 km per hour PZB warning. So now coming into Werdohl station, and here at this station I'm aiming to stop with the final platform sign, which is on the left, being in the driver's left window. Just see the final platform sign coming up there. And this is roughly the correct place to stop. Departing away from Werdohl, the speed limit is quickly going down to 70 km per hour, but we actually started under restricted monitoring as we came to a complete stop whilst under the control of a 1000 Hz magnet. So I just had to wait there until the 1000 Hz lamp extinguished, and then I was able to release from monitoring, because of course while under monitoring you can't go above 45 km per hour. So the speed limit has now just dropped to 70 km per hour. On departure from Werdohl, we had 9.4 kilometers to go to the next stop, which is Altena. The speed limit here is now going up to 90 kilometers per hour, and so I can accelerate once we've reached this second gantry. We've now reached the warning for an upcoming 80 km per hour speed restriction, which doesn't have a PZB magnet. in force, and that warning was 1 kilometre away from the speed limit itself. I'm going to reduce the speed set to 80 kilometers per hour as we approach the next right-hand curve. Now down to 80 kilometers per hour in time, and at this point we've got around 5 kilometers to go to Altena. As we approach the next tunnel coming up, we will then have around 2.6 kilometers to go to our stop, and we're going to be beginning a downward grade of 1 in 133, which will cause the train to accelerate somewhat. So I'm going to have to adjust the speed set between 70 and 80 kilometers per hour, just to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. So I believe we've just started the downward gradient here. As I noticed, we're just creeping up to around 81 kilometers per hour there. So just reduced our speed down, and then the speed will slowly creep back up. And we're now going to be downhill pretty much all of the way to our next stop at Altena. As we reach the end of this tunnel here, we've got around 1.8 kilometers to go. What I'm looking out for now as a landmark is an upcoming 70 km per hour speed warning, again with no active PZB magnet. As we reach that warning, we've got 0.9 kilometers to go to both the speed limit and our stop. So we've now reached the 70 km per hour speed warning. I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop as we approach this next upcoming left-hand curve. So I'm now going to shut the power off. And now let's put the brakes on to bring us down so that we can stop in time at Altena. just see the platform coming up. We've probably slowed down slightly too early, so I've just released the brakes momentarily and then just stopped just beyond the platform roof there that you can see on the left. And also the 70 km/h speed restriction that we had the warning for a moment ago actually comes into force halfway along the platform here. You can just see the 70 km/h speed post on the right there. So we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from Altena, the speed limit here is currently 70 km/h, with around 9 km to go to our next stop, which is Letmathe. The speed limit here is now going up to 80 km/h, so once again just waiting until we reach the second post there, and now we can accelerate up towards 80. At the approaching tunnel, we've got around 4 kilometres to go to our stop. And for some reason it seems that actually the occlusion hasn't worked with this tunnel, so the cab is fully bright even though we're in a very dark tunnel. This is the only tunnel on the route where this seems to happen, and hopefully it will be fixed in a future update for this route or something like that. The speed limit's now going up to 100 kilometers per hour with 2.9 kilometers to go to our stop. We'll shortly be coming up on kilometre post 22.0, at which point we've got 1 kilometre to go to our stop. So that's the next kilometre post. I'm going to idle the power and I'm going to apply the brakes just after the following kilometre post of 21.8. So we've now got the brakes on for our stop here at Letmathe. Like we might be slowing down slightly too early, though I think I can now see the platform just coming up. I can indeed. So I'll continue to slow down. Now I'll just release the brakes momentarily and reapply them as we enter the platform. Here at Letmathe, I'm aiming to stop at the second H sign. And this should be roughly the correct place to stop. Departing away from Letmathe, the starting speed limit here is 100 kilometers per hour, with 2 kilometers to go to an upcoming 90 kilometer per hour speed restriction, and we've got 4.3 kilometers to go at this point to our next stop, which is Hohenlimburg. So we're now just passing the warning for the upcoming 90 km per hour speed restriction. I've just reduced the speed set down to 90 now, just so that we are down to that speed in time. just now past the 90 km/h speed restriction board there, so slow down just a little bit on the early side. We had 2.1 kilometers to go at that point, and then very soon the speed limit will be going back up to 100 km/h with 1.3 kilometers to go to our stop. Speed limit's now gone back up to 100 km/h. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to idle the power at the next signal, which is coming up in a moment, and then I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop as we reach a crossing over the tracks. So I'm now idling the power at this point. And we're now just on the crossing here, so I've now got the brakes on to bring our speed down to hopefully stop at Hohenlimburg without overrunning the station. So coming a little bit faster than I intended, but I think we're still going to be able to stop in time. I'm aiming to stop just beyond the roof there on the left-hand side. So we should now be stopping in about the right place. Departing away from Hohenlimburg, the starting speed limit here is 100 km/h, though it is very shortly going up to 120 km/h, with 16.7 kilometers to go to our next and final stop, which is Hagen. Past the 120 km/h speed post there, so I'm now increasing the speed set to 120, and this is the fastest section of this whole journey. We'll be able to do 120 for most of the way now to Hagen, which, as I think I already mentioned earlier, is around 75 miles per hour. One thing I'd like to point out is that when you're using the hard in-train sim world, I noticed particularly on this route that when you see the distance to the next station, that's not actually the correct distance, that's the straight line as the crow flies distance. So the distances I've been giving you in this video, I actually took from a map of the route which I found on Wikipedia, listing the correct distances between the stations. It was particularly noticeable between Hohenlimburg and Hagen, where the HUD said that we were only 7.8 kilometers from Hagen, but in fact we're over double that at 16.7 kilometers. We've now got a warning for an upcoming 110 km/h speed restriction, which is 1.1 kilometers away from the speed limit itself. I'm going to change the speed set in a moment, just after we've done this sort of S-bend here from the left to the right. So now let's reduce the speed set to 110, and that should bring our speed down in time. So we've just entered the 110 km/h speed zone. The next speed change will be a further reduction down to 100 km/h, so I'm going to be looking out for the warning for that, which is 1 kilometer away from the speed limit itself. So we've just passed the 100 km/h speed warning there. I'm just going to now reduce the speed set to 100, and then our speed will be down in time. What I'm also looking out for now is that I know there's going to be some signals warning us of speed restrictions as we approach Hagen station. So I've got to keep a close eye on the signals and acknowledge the PZB when required. can now see that we've got a green and yellow signal just coming up. So that's indicating that we need to slow down to 40 kilometers per hour by the time that we reach the next signal. Of course, initially we've got 23 seconds to get our speed down below 85 kilometers per hour. But I also need to ensure that we are down to 40 by the time that we have reached the next signal, which is 1 kilometer away from that previous signal. So we're now down to 40 kilometers per hour, and I've also got to acknowledge the PZB at this signal, as we had a double yellow distance signal there. That indicates that the next signal is displaying a red aspect, and that's the signal at the platform at Hagen Hauptbahnhof. And I also, you may note, had to use the train brake there to get us down to 40 kilometers per hour in time. Because the AFB system uses dynamic braking, and with the dynamic braking it's less effective the slower you're going, I actually found that it just wasn't effective enough to bring our speed down to 40 kilometers per hour by the time that we'd reached the restricting signal. At this point I'm now going to idle the power. Let's start bringing our speed down for the end of the platform here. I'll say the end of the platform for the correct stopping point, which is an H sign, which is coming up shortly. You can just see the H sign there coming up on the left. As we stop here, this should be pretty much the correct place to stop. And so here we are, arrival at Hagen. Thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope that you did enjoy it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. For the latest channel updates, then please visit my Facebook page with the link to my Facebook page in the video description. And if you'd like to sponsor this channel, then please visit my Patreon page for more information, with the link to my Patreon page also in the video description. Once again, thank you for watching.